Oh yeah, audiencia, and welcome cinephiles to another week of Oye Dimelo Cinema Club. I am a paper airplane, and although you cannot see, I do have a passenger with me. I got Michaela here, as well as the lovely El Don Dino, and filling in for the role of Steve Des is El Professor Chris. And this week's movie is The Wind Rises. I have some personal history with this movie. I first saw this movie at its American premiere at the AFI Film Festival in Hollywood. Wasn't that great? It's really cool. I get to have them bragging rights. I distinctly remember in the cinema there was two reserved seats. They would put little post-its of paper, which I'm also made out of, on these seats, and one of them was reserved for Harvey Weinstein. So that was kind of cool. He never showed up. They put a seat filler into his chair. So yeah, never got to meet that fella. But yeah, that was my first introduction to the movie. This is written and directed and drawn by Hayao Miyazaki and friends. This is based upon the life of, I'm gonna butcher his name, Jiro Horikoshi, and also based upon the writings of Tatsu Hori. So it is a autobiographical movie with creative flexibility. A lot of the fictional stuff in this movie is based upon Tatsu Hori's literary works, and then Miyazaki just decided to create a hodgepodge of factuality and not so factuality into this movie. Other than that, let's go into initial first impressions and thoughts. So yeah, take it away. Whoever wants to have at it.
You
All
know,
right.
always
Oh,
nice. Well,
No, you go ahead. My passenger.
it's always nice to see a Miyazaki film that's kind of like grounded in something. Um, I think that he does his best work in like his most like banal of premises, and I think that this is just a lovely film in general. So, if you're a fan, you should definitely check it out.
All right, yeah. Let's pass the baton to Dino. Would be to Dino.
all right. All right. So, first time watching this movie, I've been seeing, I don't know, probably like 8 Miyazaki films now. Uh, the fact that you said you went to the AFI thing, I had to look. I was like, oh, this is 2013. It just felt like one of the older movies. It still had that kind of drawn, overly drawn kind of effect. I enjoyed it. The one thing though, it felt really long. I don't know why, but the even though it's not long at all, but maybe it was the dream sequences and it was at times a little bit monotonous, right? But it felt really long. It's I don't know if this is part of like maybe a trilogy kind of thing of his like pre and World War II and post World War II kind of well, everything is kind of around that area, which I guess it would be around uh his youth, I would imagine. But yeah, I enjoyed it. The dream sequence was wild with the Italian guy. Yeah, he always has some sort of flying things in his movies, whether it's the dragons, whether it's you know the castle in the sky, how all that. So it's interesting seeing, I guess, kind of like Michaela said, a little more grounded, right? Because it still goes into dreams, it still does all this other stuff, but the fact that it follows more of a actual person historical one, other than the Fireflies one, and it goes into sad moments. Like I was just like, what? Like it was so shocking. Not like the room shocking where the lady's like, I got cancer, but like pretty shocking where it's just like I have tuberculosis. Like I was like, wait, what? I wasn't expecting that at all. My best friend, his dad from New Zealand, actually, as a young kid, had tuberculosis, and the idea of going to a mountain to like try, whatever the altitude and the different kind of air, he did that as well. I mean, he just turned 95, so clearly, this is way back when, and he actually went to Brazil, to like the mountains in Brazil where they had a tuberculosis kind of center, if you will, and he actually met his first wife there, and they both survived. So anyway, so that to me, I was like, oh wow, this is super interesting. I actually kind of have a little connection that I know someone that actually went through that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's crazy. This cartoon that at times can seem like it's for kids. It's more like a family cartoon, and then it deals with some really kind of sad and dark issues. So, but I enjoyed it. It was I enjoy it.
That is
That's it.
it's strange that that's the second time that I heard TB brought love together, which isn't a lot, but that's it's weird that it happened twice.
Yeah.
We're gonna pass it on to Professor Chris.
So for me, I believe I saw Kiki's Delivery Service, which is another Miyazaki, right? Or no?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I saw that. I gotta think like right after college. And so I didn't remember what I was getting into. The thing that I really like about this movie is when you say it's a biopic and it's like loosely based on this person's life. When he like created this movie, he had to like not only create what he pictured the character or that person to be based on like accounts or whatever, but then he had to like design this whole what would that guy's dream be like and like who would influence him and all that. So like for me, I just picture him in a room somewhere with a pencil like drawing in all different directions arrows as to ways he could go with this, and I just would really be really cool to listen to him explain how he designed this film, like, or how he, I don't know, engineer, I don't know what word to use. I really, really liked it for that reason, because then I kept thinking about that the entire time. It is long, and there are times where I'm like, they probably could have cut that scene, or the quiet scenes were a little long at times for me, but I did really, really like it, and I definitely feel like I want to watch it again, but without, just with subtitles. I would like to see it that way.
For certain. And yes, this is I thought it was a really great movie myself. I mean, I picked it. I would assume that I would like the movies that I picked. My introduction to Miyazaki was Spirited Away, and this film, of course, is um, very much in the world of Rio. It takes some liberties with. It's funny that even though you see the fantastical in the dream sequences, it still has that Miyazaki magic, even in a more grounded, much more real movie. Definitely not as real as, let's say, Graveyard of the Fireflies, which was another Studio Ghibli film. Definitely not as real as that. But it's funny that this is a much more adult film, but I definitely would still be okay with showing this with perhaps a family or even younger audience could still probably enjoy the film. Of course, there are a few dark elements in the movie, but nonetheless, very beautiful picture. There's some folks I recall that when this movie came out, there was some controversy purely because of the whole subject matter of romanticizing the Zeros, the Japanese Zeros flight planes. But this it's very for a movie about war. It's very anti-war, very passive in a way. But I'm sure we'll talk about that within.
I wouldn't say it's a movie about war though. I think it's a movie about the struggle. That it's always a thing of like scientists and stuff like that, where they're coming up with these things and they don't really uh, their intention. I mean, this could be like they kept saying like we're doing a plane and the only way we can do our designs is for the military. But it's that struggle. I remember in like World War. I remember when I was in World War I, like like the guy that invented, like someone actually invented the barbed wire, right? The barbed wire that we know that is the wires that are kind of strung along, and then the spikes that create kind of whatever you call that. And he did it kind of for like cattle and fencing and just doing this thing, and then they used it in World War II. In World War I, and he was terrified, horrified, because he was like, I created this as a way to, like just keep your cattle or just keep, your border and then it was used as a way to like between that and the mustard gas and all that, it was like a horrible thing in World War One. So and I don't think this is propaganda for the Japanese army or military or whatever, but I did enjoy kind of the struggle, even the Italian and then the German, and then it was like this is a losing war. And again, I don't know if that's just hindsight of Miyazaki and looking at it, or historically seen and knowing like, oh, there was no way this would have ended well, right? So it's I did appreciate that it was kind of seen that way as like this is already a losing battle, but we are artists, scientists, in creating. Like it hadn't been that long since airplanes were being used. It was towards the end of World War One. It was very different. It was so it was a very is it solemn? Is that the word I'm looking? Sad, solemn kind of
Yeah, so
retrospective of these kind of scientists and artists and technicians, that designers that are kind of just like, I have this vision. I want to do this beautiful thing, but I know that it's going to be either used for war or b, even the Tommy gun. Now the Tommy gun was, the guy did invent it, created it for the U.S. military, but the U.S. military didn't end up buying it because they had already like wasted money on a French type of machine gun, and that was horrible. So the guy that invented the Tommy gun was like, "Well, this is a great machine," and then all the mobsters bought it. So it was a weird thing where he's like, "I wanted it for the military to fight the Germans and bad people," and now all these mobsters, it became like the gun associated with it.
like alcohol, yeah.
I mean, that's still a killing machine, so it's not the same, but just the idea of like of doing stuff. Anywho, that's a Dino side
Who knows what
track.
happens when you sell an idea, right? It's no longer
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
Just make sure to copyright it, get that patent, get your residuals, get your royalties.
Print it out and mail it to yourself, and don't open it. Right? Remember that was the whole idea for screenwriting and dramaturgy. All right, what else? Paper plane.
Oh, I wanted to hear if Chris had anything to say.
No, I was going to talk about a little bit about the main character in that scenario that he's discussing in that solemn, sad situation. And then, like, they brought in characters for him to interact with to make it seem like he is focused. He's the most focused person who's a dreamer I've ever seen. Because he does have a focus the entire time. And, like, they bring in, I don't want to say like stock people, stock characters to do, but like his sister's a little annoying at the beginning and stuff like that. And then John Krasinski, I don't know, Hanjo comes in, and like that's a certain like his part, right? Dude, I'm not going to be able to do it without talking about the voiceover.
No, it's all good.
Once I knew who the people were, though, then I like, especially John Krasinski. I've never watched Jack Ryan, and the reason is because I cannot picture him except Jim from The Office, and I just can't picture. I feel like I'm going to see that the whole time. So that was a hard part for me. I would watch it again without the voiceover. I thought I would really like it. I read a lot of good things about it. Like, do it with the voiceover. The acting was good, but I think once I realized it was Joseph Gordon-Levitt, then I was like, I see Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this guy. You know what I mean? So it's I think it was different for me that way.
Oh, I didn't look at it. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't end up looking up who was who, so I didn't get that at all. I had no idea who was doing the voice.
Yeah. No, it was kind of distracting for me. I've seen it mostly in Japanese, but I decided to watch the dub for the first time in a while today. And the only person I could like think about is just Werner Herzog as the German in the
Yeah.
I fell in love in the middle of the summer. It's quite magical. And
he was just in Pinocchio.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't he? Wasn't he in Pinocchio?
I think so.
No, that was Christoph Waltz. Christoph Waltz, another German.
Same voice.
They should be in a movie together.
That's
But I did love the character archetypes in this movie, because it's funny that from my understanding, Jiro did have the Italian engineer Cobroni, like he was an influence with the real Jiro. So that much I know is true. And it's great that even though it plays off as a dream, or is my audio being weird?
No. Oh, it is.
To me, it does. But go on. Maybe. Anyway, while he figures that out, the other thing, let's sidetrack to: is this the cartoon with the most chain smoking in it?
They are smoking the whole time.
Oh my
That's
god!
all they did was smoke. And they got like
she's,
angry.
huh?
If they didn't have a cigarette, he was like, "Oh no, I really need a cigarette right now." It was like a cigarette smoking propaganda movie.
And yeah, that's the propaganda. It's big
Oh
tobacco.
no, we're gonna be toast. Go ahead.
the like poor wife is just like about to die from tuberculosis, and she's like, don't let go of my hand. It's like, I need a cigarette. And it's like, don't let go of my hand, just smoke a cigarette. And he's like, but you're, she's like, it's okay. And he still lights up. It's like, what a dick. Like, your wife has died from tuberculosis. You can't
Right
go
next to
one
you.
night.
Yeah.
You can't wait until she like falls asleep and then you can like sneak out. I was just like, no way, Jose. But I love those dream sequences. I will say, just like, and all the people popping up from like all the places of the airplane,
Yeah.
and just the concept of, it's not whatever the movie with DiCaprio and all them, Nolan,
Titanic.
Titanic with Nolan, Christopher Nolan, that they go in the dream.
Inception.
Yeah. Which also which has Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But the idea of it being like just the acknowledgement, like, you're in my dream, but no, I am dreaming, and that they find that, like, that idea. I don't know if I've seen it done before. Of like people, because then I thought of like, oh, this must be the dream, is that he's having this conversation. But I accepted it as just like, no, both of these people somehow are connected in the dream.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the archetype people coming in. It was like, it would kind of lean somewhere, and then it would be like dream sequence, and you'd be like, all right, he's still focused on the whole time though. That's what I really loved about the dream sequences. I felt like it showed like a focus that normally dream sequences take you away from the focus, but everything there just kept bringing you back to like how that person, got that, a person that's that passionate. I feel like,
yeah, I was before the whole audio thing was effing me up. I was gonna say, like, it kind of reminded me of like basically a teacher. Like the Cabroni acted as our guy's Yoda in a way, and it did impact him and his thoughts throughout the movie, which made the dreams much more real. And there's even elements like the use of a train and the passage of time, and then we see like even there's elements that don't look like it's in the dream, but like we could assume is still in the dream, like him going to the train, and one of his planes blows up right in front of him, and debris just falls all across him everywhere. I would assume that was not real, that was like, that's in his head, like kind of like, the whole foreshadowing and whatnot.
No, I think the blowing up, like, that happens when you're testing airplanes, right? Like,
oh no, but this was him going towards there was a sequence where he's going to a train because he was told that he's going to explore more of Europe, and while he's going to this train, a plane blows up, and you see like refuse just falling all around him when he's about to take that next step in his life to explore the rest of the world for the betterment of his company.
Oh, yeah. I got it.
That was the only time that I assumed that was a dream that did not involve the Italian character.
Right.
So it was like the only time that we don't see him is like, ooh, kind of like scary foreshadowing.
You know what I think is really special or amazing? I don't know exactly how I'm wording it. So don't cancel me, guys. but Japanese media and art, right? Like you have Godzilla, which comes out from the nuclear blast, right? Like that was their, that's kind of what, like Hiroshima and all that, like that's what the original Godzilla was kind of dealing with. But also the fact I watch a lot of Akira Kurosawa movies and Toshiro Mifune, and the whole earthquake thing, like that, like Akira Kurosawa was like a kid when like this giant earthquake also happened. I don't know if it's that one specifically, but it's around that time because they were kids and they're going through the wreckage and like stumbling through like dead people. So it's interesting how all these artists in Japan, like you have that big Tokyo earthquake and all that, and kids that kind of grew up and had to deal with that to then just almost immediately having to deal with World War II, and it was either
A
Toshiro
lot of trauma
Mifune
at a
or
young age. Yeah.
yeah, either Toshiro Mifune or Akira Kurosawa was also in the plane, like airplane kind of department, and one of them was dealt with a kamikaze pilot. So imagine that effect, right? And this is empathy, right? Of just like you're put in this horrible situation and you know what's going to happen to the people. And so then to see once this is kind of over, these artists dealing with those emotions and that pain and that struggle, especially knowing that you're king and all that, just kind of, I mean, it's around World War II, World War One, even like just the idea that all these kings were just basically toying with the lives of regular people that had nothing to do with what was actually the situation. They were just in a bad position. Not talking about evil, not talking about the horrible people. I'm just talking about the situation,
Mhm.
especially that kids are put in, young adults, kids that are thrown into the fire basically. So I really with this movie just dealing with the fact that we all know what's going to happen in World War II. We all know what's going to happen with these airplanes, and it's just like some people like this is my job, and I just want to make beautiful airplanes, and I just want to like create like the idea of flying is impossible for humans, and we accomplished that. And I thought it was really interesting. One of his prototypes that actually worked, that flew, or maybe it was just one that he explained to like the group. He's like, yeah, it has this weight, and to keep it at this weight, and to keep it at that speed, it's gonna have to be without the machine guns.
Yeah, the thing that it's like designed to do, like to
I
bring,
know it was
and they laugh it off because like, well, what's the point? But it's like, no,
because
that's
because
him, like
everyone
that's
was
his plane. Like
yeah
in order
like
for it to be the best that it could be, it can't be as heavy, and so like we either have to pick the guns or the bombs, which
well,
was
not
a
even the bombs,
compromising
but
thing.
it was like this right beautiful design, and it's like the wheels go up so that it helps against the drag. Like it was all this great shit, and then it's
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, but it can't have weapons on it. So
They didn't want that.
Yeah.
How about the just the vastness of the planes, even clearly in the dreams, and then how violently they crashed. That was like some of the most. He must have been like, you know what, guys, we got to go back. We need another plane crashing right here, man. There's a lot of plane crashes in this movie, and they're all violent and they all involve fire. I think that's the only thing that would freak out. I mean, the curious subject matter is there, but also those visuals might be rough on a young kid watching this movie, possibly, because it was intense. They did make sure there was a parachute, though, of the one guy at the very beginning, and that was so G.I. Joe in the 80s, man.
Yeah.
Like every single time they'd shoot down a fighter,
yeah.
a little parachute to make sure nobody died.
I had the little plastic dude with a little parachute that you were,
Drop throw.
like
Yeah,
I don't even know if we ever got it to work, right? Because you throw it and it's supposed to pop, and
Mhm.
You bought
maybe
But it
the
was
first
also like,
time, and then
yeah, no, but like for sure, like they even because I would be more worried about if anything were to traumatize a kid, probably like the destruction that you see from the earthquakes, and also like the few shots
yeah,
that you see of like consequence of firebombing, which
Oh,
it's not a lot, but like because it's funny because like like it's the war is always behind everybody's mind in the movie, and it's not the focus point necessarily through the narrative, but like it's always there.
Yeah, it's
And
lurking.
we get little nuggets, and like Gino said, we have the gift of hindsight and we know what's gonna happen, but like you see these little nuggets being dropped, and it's like how it's gonna end. And it's crazy that the movie does acknowledge without really showing it, like, yeah, it didn't end that well for us at the end.
well, I mean, even the whole thing with the German, right? Of just like, what kid is going to understand when he has to then hide because the German also had to flee and they're being looked because it's basically this German was fleeing, the whole Nazi command and all that shit, right? Like that's what that was. And so, it's not like the Firefly movie where clearly that's super like in your face. This one has, we as adults understand what those are, but yeah, a kid would be like,
No
huh,
idea.
why are they, he's being chased, or why does he have to hide? Like, wouldn't necessarily understand it. Um, crap, what was the other thing? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. You brought up the earthquake and stuff like that. What great use of sound, right? Like the rumbling of the earthquake, and then it was very guttural. Am I mistaken?
No, it was
No,
very
Not
loud.
like
like
almost
it
everything.
wasn't like a fake sound. That was
Yeah,
like
anything that
almost.
like seemed to impose danger of some sort had like it almost sounded like human. Like a
Yeah.
lot of the planes had a human sound before like the eve of destruction, before something bad happened. Like it sounded like a person, and then
Hmm.
Yeah.
like then it goes,
Totally.
you know.
No, I thought that was super interesting. Because, excuse me, I don't think he's used that in other movies. Maybe I'm
No,
mistaken.
not that I recall. Like it was one of the things I noticed like almost quickly, in that I realized, oh, this is a choice that they're sticking with. Like the planes sound like people, like the destruction
Yeah.
that you hear from the city during the aftershocks sound like people as well.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was definitely an interesting choice, and like I'm not sure what was behind. I would like to know what was behind that choice. Like why make it sound like somebody?
Well,
You know?
the I was thinking just like humans building in an area where, because they talked about like Tokyo rebuilding and rebuilding so quickly, and it's just all this destruction, and a lot of that has to do either with human creation or just humans knowing like a danger but uh not taking the warnings, if you will. Because I feel like a lot of his movies also have to do with like nature and kind of like myths and like similar with like Del Toro and what he does with the different mystical kind of creatures. And so I think a lot of it is like whether it's human greed or it's human temptation or it's this and that. And usually humans historically fuck shit up, right? Like you keep building where the tornadoes, happen. You keep building where hurricanes happen. You keep building where fires always break out. So it's this idea, I think that it's like nature and humans, it's like yeah, I think it's a combination of that and a relationship of that and how regardless nature is always going to win and it's going to outlast humans. So I think it's just maybe like human stupidity or stubbornness, and he decided to do the voice kind of stuff where human can't realize, they aren't smart enough to recognize that this has happened over and over again, or he was low on a budget and couldn't get like sound effects.
for his supposed last movie. He's like, I got spent all my money on the actual drawing part. Like, you
Yeah.
guys figure out the sound.
And
Give it
and
to the
had
intern with a cold.
had to hook up his Winamp. Is that you guys remember that?
Yeah, totally. I remember when I.
Yeah, he does. And the skins, you could get different skins for it and all that. Yeah.
I like the Matrix one.
I was gonna.
That's my favorite skin on Winamp.
I was gonna say the Matrix one. Oh man, I was gonna say the same thing, but
Is the director still alive?
Yes,
Yeah.
Miyazaki is working on one. Again, when this movie came out, a lot of people were saying that this might be his last picture.
That was going to be my
And
question.
I did see the documentary that Jason recommended, which like if Chris, you got to see it too. It doesn't go as deep as you would like to when it comes to making of the movie, but it does talk about the impact of Miyazaki has in Studio Ghibli with the film and whatnot. But yeah, this was supposed to be his last movie. But like, it's funny because they say the line in the film, the 10 years of an artist, 10 years later, he's making one last one.
Yeah,
he's
totally.
He's I think almost 90 now.
Okay.
Like if he's not still in his 80s, he is definitely like closer to 90.
So yeah, so how many, I don't know, people hang on. Dude, I just saw a picture the other day of Gene Hackman at like 93.
He's still alive?
Yeah, Gene Hackman's alive. He looks a lot different. He looks a lot older. But some of these guys, I mean, I know he gave up acting a while ago, but like you would think living these lives and hard lives in a lot of ways. I mean, this guy right here, I have no idea if he has any vices, Miyazaki, but at the same time, like, you've got to imagine it's like being a professional football coach where like you don't see your family a whole lot when you're trying to make this many movies at this level. Like, I don't know what his family life is like, but I would imagine that's a pretty serious, passionate commitment, to that.
The stubbornness of an artist.
Yeah, 100%. And he runs the studio too, right? Doesn't he?
He makes
right?
A lot of other folks, but I think out of everyone who works there, he's made the most films, or at least the more acclaimed films. Like when you think of Miyazaki, you think of Studio Ghibli, but there are other people who work there who's also made a few films as well. Some of them mostly acclaimed, but I think his is for sure the face of the studio when you think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah. What else?
So the one other thing I brought up before that I want to talk about is apparently his wife, John Krasinski's wife, is in it too.
Oh yeah, Emily. In the English dub, it's
The way they pick the actors, I don't know. I don't know if it would have changed it. I think I would have liked it more if I didn't know who they were, and I also like they weren't the voices that I know. I definitely did not pick up Martin Short at all. Maybe that could have been the easiest one, but I didn't get that at all.
But I definitely knew that was Martin Short as soon as that little man's voice.
Was that the short guy? Was Martin Short the short guy?
Yeah.
I wasn't paying attention like that. I don't know why. I normally do, but yeah, the only one I picked out was Werner Herzog. Who was Emily Blunt?
Emily Blunt was the wife.
Yeah, Jiro's wife.
Was she doing her regular accent?
I don't think so.
It was American.
Was she doing like an Americanized accent?
She was doing an Americanized accent for the English dub. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because like I know in the Japanese one, like you don't get to like we don't know that many Japanese artists, so we don't know who's who. But I thought it was an interesting choice that for Jiro's voice in the original Japanese one, it was actually the voice was made by a friend of the studio who actually has done more directing work and not voice acting work, and that was intentional because they wanted someone who sounded a bit more like clear but not monotone, very direct, because like that's who Jiro was, a very kind of like humble but direct person, very analytical but empathetic, just all around good guy, smart guy, Jiro.
I could see that.
He was very likable, I will say that. I almost thought the guy in the dream, the Italian guy, was gonna steal his design.
Oh
I kept
That would have
waiting,
been
like
awesome.
they're sharing a dream, and I thought it was like, you ruined my life because you know.
I'm gonna bring the fishbone out first.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh. I'm glad that he stayed in the dream sequence. It does kind of suggest that maybe perhaps they are linked when you do see like when you do see Cabroni's uh design with the 3-wing design completely just fail, and it would have been around the same time that the earthquake did happen. So that did legit happen in history, where that big airship, semi boat, whatever, like collapsed around the same time. So
Can I?
it's
Can I?
go ahead,
Oh,
go for it.
No, go on.
No, I'm gonna say, so I'm glad that like they kept his character in that realm, and even at the end, like it's still within that ethereal realm. Like it's that part of the story. Like we don't need him in the real life with Jiro and whatnot.
Well, I wonder how much they overlap those with their actual lives, right? It seemed like Cabroni was maybe, well, he was definitely older. That's why it was like Japanese boy. So I don't even know like how much their lives actually overlapped, or if it was just you know, looking back at his work. But what I will say is, what I will say also, how great is the that line where Cabroni is like, "This is my last plane." You know, for an artist or whatever, engineer, you have 10 years of creativity, and then it's done. And I was like, that is mind blowing. And I'm thinking like all these artists, all these even currently, right? Usually it's more like artist, painter, blah blah blah, but also actors. Like it gets to a certain point, and then the crowd just starts to kind of be like, they do the same shit over and over.
Yeah.
They're no longer creative. They're no longer this. So it's an interesting thing that he like picked up on it and was like, an artist has 10 years of creativity, and then you should just go retire.
That's like
But
every
good.
good album, right? A band's first album that's really good. It's like they spent their whole lives putting that one together, and then they get all this like encouragement and money and everything, and they're like, I'm creative, and boom, they're in a killer album, and then slowly deteriorates from there. You know, like
it's funny. Oh. No, sorry. I was gonna say. I also thought it was really like I said earlier, with the little historical nuggets that we, the audience, already know, and then he brings up that he's been working with the company for 5 years already. So that gives us again the just that little great hindsight is like, oh no, like you have 5 more years until things really hit the fan, like in your timeline, you know. And then they bring it up again at the end of the movie where he asks, like, well, how did you spend your 10 years?
So it's interesting to me that I came in at this exact piece of conversation, because this is what I wanted to talk about the most. Because I thought about it, about the 10 years thing for an artist, and I really contemplated it. And then it hit me all of a sudden. I'm like, this coming from a guy who has been making movies for 30 some odd years, right? And arguably, maybe some of his best work has come in the later 20 years of his career. So it's funny that he would say that as an artist who has like done triple the amount of time of being great, as you know, he mentions in his script.
And then 10 years later, he decides to make one last movie. If he pushes like 120, who knows? We'll see 5 more movies from this guy.
So I don't know. Maybe that's like the average artist, but maybe great artists have a longer span. But you know, I know what you guys are saying, and I guess there's an argument for both cases. But I just feel like as an artist, you have the ability to go way longer than 10 years. Maybe you have to reinvent yourself at some point and be open to change. Like, you know, you think about artists like Madonna and Janet Jackson, like every album they reinvent themselves, right? Yeah. So maybe it's something like that.
Well, how long has the Queen Bee been going on? She's
Beyonce?
been, yeah, she's
Beyonce's
still
been going on
going.
for like 20 years.
Yeah. But yeah, you gotta evolve, right? You gotta. I feel like maybe that's what he was saying. This movie again, didn't realize this movie came out in 2013. I think he's mainly doing like just producing and stuff, like, or he's producing more than I think like the writing and directing aspect of it. Um, but
Did
yeah,
Steven Spielberg only have 10 years?
yeah, think about it.
Yeah, they were
When's
the
the
Did
80s.
last
Michael
That
good
was
movie
Jackson only
stupid.
have 10 years?
When's the last good thing Steven Spielberg said? Come at me, internet. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Uh,
Steven Spielberg is nominated for an Oscar this year.
I know,
For a
but
movie that only 5 people saw.
I was gonna say, what movie is it?
I'm just kidding.
The
I'm just
Fableman.
kidding. I'm
Fableman.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, no, I mean, but think about it. Like Tarantino is like, I'm only doing 10 movies, right? Like he really spreads it out, but he's like, like, how much more do you want me to do? Like, this is what I love doing it, and clearly, certain people he might change his mind later, or whatever. But
So this is
there,
what I gather from it, my interpretation at least. I think maybe an artist has 10 years of focus in him to create great work, right? Like, I'm going to give all my focus to a theme or things. And it doesn't have to be 10 years straight, but you get 10 solid years of like human ability to focus like on only that thing before life takes over. You have kids, you have spouse, you have partners, you have friends, relationships, and business, and all these different things, that steal your focus away in life. But maybe as a human, you can give 10 solid focus years of nonstop, like intent, acute focus to a thing.
could it be 10 years of innovation? Kind of like you're saying, it might not be 10 years together, but like 10 years of innovation. And then it can be like you kind of are just repeating, or maybe even if you're just bettering what you did before, right? We're talking about Jackie Chan, right, Jason? And now, like, he's in his later years, clearly. And even once he made the jump over to the U.S., what they were basically doing was just rehashing his old stunts, but filming it differently. Because when he was doing it in Hong Kong, he could do 100 takes of like one shot or one scene of him trying to open a ladder and fight with that and all that. Whereas in Hollywood, they're not going to give you 100 takes, right? They're not going to give you 200 takes. They're going to cut it up. The whole idea of like, oh, we'll fix it in post. Like, so you could almost say Jackie Chan had those like boom, boom, boom periods of like 10 years, probably more than that, where then once he did make the jump over to Hollywood, then it was him kind of just, rehashing and kind of trying to evolve in a different kind of style. I mean, he came over without knowing English and then was able to learn it. And because it used to be all dubbed, they used to dub him as well. And then he's kind of grown on that. And then you have a movie that not a lot of people saw, The Foreigner, with him and Pierce Brosnan, which was a completely different Jackie Chan. But it was like a cool thing of like, oh, Jackie Chan has this other level. And so I feel like it's this combination of like how creative you can be and then how creative do people let you be, right? Like that's the idea of someone like Basquiat or Basquiat and dude with soup cans, Campbell's cans, and like right at the end of their lives, it was like, oh, you guys are has-beens, you guys have, no longer creative, you're no longer this or that, and then it's like it's still that they had like such a small time of creativity, and they were even said that they were done, they were has-beens, their shit didn't, hit anymore. And now everything they done is just like, oh no, this is way more than what we expected. Yes. Paper
What
plane?
about Da Vinci?
The what?
Da Vinci?
Leonardo da Vinci.
What about him?
Oh my
He
God.
had
Things
more
were
than a 10-year
different also
run,
back
didn't he?
then. you could stare at the stars every single night because there was no light, and you weren't going to just use up your candle. You could literally stare at the stars for 80 years and figure shit out and figure like, oh, Halley's Comet, that comes every 80 something years because I read what someone else wrote. So I feel like back then it was different. Back then I think you had more than 10 years. It's only been in this moment of time where everything is out there and everyone can now see your thing, that I think you have a smaller time period of all the comedians were like, "Oh, you used to be funny. You're no longer funny. You used to be funny, but you're no longer funny." Right? Like that's
I
a
think
thing that
because they
happens a
got
lot.
comfortable. Like I mean, specifically with comedy, they get comfortable, don't they? They stop
Is
going to
it
the nightclub every night, working on their set. They get too famous. They don't want to be in those scenes anymore.
now, is it comfortable or is it they've evolved, right? Because another thing with comics is like once you get married and then you have kids, now your jokes kind of evolve to what your life actually is, and it's about, your
I
wife
mean,
and your
it'll
kids.
it'll evolve, sure, but funny is funny. And I think the comedians who are no longer funny, I mean, some people can run out of the well, they could lose the juice. But I
Yeah.
think for the most part, it's because they stopped going to the well that gave them the source. So if you're a comic and you're like in the club every night working on material, but then you get famous and you're on tour, that means you're not in the club working on material. You're on tour touring the old material.
Well, I guess that goes with fighters also, right? With boxers, and probably the last case of it being like a Ronda Rousey, or even
I
was
think
it
athletes
Luis?
are a little different though.
Yeah. But in that kind of sport, when it's like, oh, now we'll put you in a movie, now we'll put you in this and that,
Then
and
she's not
then
training as hard.
yeah, exactly.
But
Your priorities kind of start to change, and then that's when your fans or artists or audience might not be, they don't know that your priorities have changed. So it doesn't necessarily mean, like, especially with an artist or a comedian, that you're just not funny. It's just kind of like you've changed, you've evolved, you've grown, you've taken a different approach, but your audience that had you here and knew you for this are kind of like you're not funny. But a completely new audience or group of people might think that you are funny because they're more inclined to that kind of humor,
humor.
not this kind of humor or art or whatever. Woo! Oh, Jason, what's your first impressions, initial thoughts since you joined us somewhat
I'll just quickly, because I'm late, I'll quickly just give it to a short version. My first impression of this thing was I really like it, and I started to think like when I was younger, I used to like animes that had like all action in them, and now like that I'm like aging, I feel like I like animes that don't have any action in them. I just want a good story now. The more melodramatic, the better. Uh, I really did like this thing. I thought that the lead character was very sweet and sympathetic, and there's a lot about him that actually reminded me of myself in a lot of ways. Actually, not to say like that I'm an all around good dude, because this guy was all around good dude. But I like to like I think that I would be the guy that would help someone on the train and and just do it. And then like I feel like because I'm so in my head about things and always looking back at the past, and I have like this really strong memory that I would go back to see if I can like visit them later, and they would be gone. So I did really relate to the main character. I thought it was a very sweet story. It felt very personal, like from the writing perspective. I don't know how much of this Miyazaki pulled from wherever. It seems like a lot of his stories, I mean, at least the ones that I've seen, do deal with World War II and all that jazz. Obviously, he was like, lived through that stuff. So, that leaves an impression on one. But I really like this thing. The animation is beautiful as always. But one thing that really struck out to me was the simplicity of all of it. The simplicity of the story, the simplicity of the characters, the simplicity of like their desires. And that reminds me of like a lot of like Japanese films from like the 50s and 60s, man. They're always very simple. And in that simplicity, there's this like profound, complex beauty. You know, it's like a flower that just keeps opening up to this simple little thing, these simple little ideas. And I think this kind of falls into that category. So those were my first impressions.
Nice. It was, I guess, Paper Plane brought up a lot of information about like how it was based historically and almost autobiographical is what he said. But autobiographical, I don't think is a thing. I think it's biographical because
Yeah,
a
auto
bunch of
is
those
when the
Zero.
person themselves make the story, right? So
paper
yeah,
plane doesn't
I
go there.
misspoke. I misspoke is the phrase for
So
that
yeah, so
one.
apparently it was pretty biographical, other than the whole fantastical parts of it. But I guess
Oh no,
the
it's literally like because I also mentioned that like this the name also comes from a story the wind has risen, which has nothing to do with Jiro's story, but there's a lot of elements from that story that is added to this particular story. Like
Is that an anime as well?
yeah, I believe it's a manga, or if it's a straight up just it's either a manga or straight up a book. Because I know that the wife character, Nemoko, I think her name was, she's based upon a character from those books. So she is one of the characters that are fictional in this movie.
Man, we're gonna get blasted for not knowing if it's a manga or just a comic book or a
I think
graphic novel.
I think biopics too are like from the scene of like who directs them, right? So you have Oliver Stone biopics that take lots of really go out there, and like he can kind of say whatever he wants and do whatever he wants with the character. And then this is more like he took I'm looking for a word. He took
Inspiration.
The essence.
yeah, or just like he went on his own liberties to kind of lead it down a path, but he just included like dream sequences with what I would believe is probably mostly true things. Clearly the wording is not true, that dialogue, but the whole story otherwise I believe is probably a true story about the guy.
I think you're looking for artistic liberties.
That's what I was looking for.
No, I think kind of like Platoon, right? Oliver Stone, like he was in Vietnam. He actually, fought in it and then came out with movies like Platoon. So it's like in his mind what he saw and what feelings he gets from it. So I can kind of see that of this kind of movie where it's like, what's the kind of essence and what can I build on type of thing, right? I will say, I prefer this kind of thing, even with dream sequences and all this, that captures these characters, like, especially the main character and Cabroni. No, it's a Cabroni. And
It's
but just
I think it's
like,
Caproni.
it's a nice way of doing it instead of I was talking to Jason also about some of these biopics where instead of just exploring something, it just becomes, especially a musician's biopic, it's the same shit over and over, and then when you look up their like history or whatever, it's like there was so much more interesting shit that you just took out just to follow this formula. So I really enjoyed this movie and Miyazaki when he does kind of like get historical accounts and stuff like that, that he's able to like, let's explore a certain part of this story instead of just putting the whole narrative that we've heard so many times, right? We've seen war movies so many times. We've seen stuff like that. So he's like, how can I explore a different facet of this story or this person?
Let me ask you, did anybody see it I don't know if it's your first time watching this film or not, but when you think back to your first time watching it, did anyone think at any point that he was building the kamikaze planes?
No, when I first saw it, it's funny because like everyone knew it as the last or would be the last Miyazaki picture, so I went in not even knowing the history of this guy at all, or I knew that it was gonna be based upon someone, but I did not know the story or the background of this guy. So yeah, the ending shot like that was a surprise to me when I first saw it. Like I know that, oh, it's the same guy who made these planes, you know. So yeah, definitely was a surprise in my first time with watching the movie 9 years ago.
And
I believe
once
I
you got
figured
to
it
the
out.
Nazi Germany part, though, then I was like, okay, I see where this is going. Like, I mean, I think at that point, that's when I started to be like, okay, he's going to be designing something that's not going to be, yeah, like a warplane.
Yeah, I wasn't sure until like the final thing where it says dedicated to Hiro, whatever his name was. Like, oh shoot, that's a real guy, probably. You know, that's what I was thinking. And then it's like, but I did recognize at some point when they were doing the engineering part, I was like, I picked up on something. I was like, oh snap, they're building the kamikaze planes. So they kept talking about lighter planes, getting rid of this equipment. And I guess maybe I've seen like a war documentary at some point where something connected the dots for me. I got into a lot of World War II history over like maybe the last 10 years and whatnot. So I don't know. Just traveling. That's what it is. Traveling around the US. Every city you go to in America, there's some type of exhibit or what do you call it? A historical reference or historical
Like a monument?
monument sort of to World War II and what that community did to participate in the war. And it's always fascinating to me that like the whole world was at war. Like it's insane. But yeah, so that.
the biggest thing, I thought the same thing of the kamikaze, but that explained why it had to be so light. They had really bad engines, so their engines didn't have the power or production to make enough speed or power to sustain a heavier plane. But that's why probably it evolved into kamikaze just as a, like, yeah, we don't have the weight or whatever, so we'll just do these tiny little things that you know dive
Was
bomb.
anybody else interested in finding a kamikaze documentary after this?
I've
So
seen
we're
other
watching next
ones.
week.
I've seen other ones, and I think I think you weren't here yet, but I think even in a Akira Kurosawa, no, in a Toshiro Mifune, there's a Toshiro Mifune documentary. It might be on HBO, and Toshiro Mifune was part of the aviation program in Japan, and he dealt with a kamikaze program, and it's like that's what was really traumatic for him. And Kurosawa was, I think, in a similar kind of situation of like, you're, because he was older already at that point, I think, in World War II or leading up to it, and it was all these younger people, younger kids that are usually put in a kamikaze situation or
Yep.
put in a suicide bombing type of thing, and it's just like promised all this stuff, and so it's the horror, fucking war and stuff, where you're put in this kind of impossible situation where you, I guess, have to figure out what you're capable and not capable of doing. Yeah. So before you came in, I had kind of mentioned that and just like empathy and realizing what people were kind of thrown into, whether they had a choice or not. Kind of like the idea of the German guy who was, clearly fleeing from Nazi Germany and what was happening there and starting to build there, to the point where they went after Giro just because it was like they know there was a connection with the German guy. So I don't know how much that is historically accurate with the Giro guy, like if he also was persecuted, or if that's like adding that
Taking
now,
liberties.
yeah, and historically,
Well,
or just of people that did kind of escape that, right? And like in the U.S., people during the Vietnam War, they were like, I don't want to go fight. I'll go to Canada, or I'll go to Mexico, or I'll go somewhere else, right? There are people that for one reason or another are like, yeah, I don't really want to. This doesn't seem right. I'm gonna find a way out of this. Yeah.
gotcha. Well, I guess from what I understand in history, after the war, he just went into teaching, and basically that was basically it. In history. That's what happened. Even though this film takes a lot of creative freedom with said history. Okay, so if there's any speak now, forever hold your peace. You guys want to wrap this up and go into our final thoughts?
Sure, I'll go real quick. I enjoyed the movie. Like I said at the beginning, I thought it felt long, but it's not a long movie. Of the Miyazaki movies, this is not even a top five of what I would recommend first for some to suggest a Miyazaki film. But if I'm in a conversation with someone that has seen Miyazaki films and maybe is interested in seeing some other stuff, then I would recommend it. Or but it would be a hard first movie to recommend to someone that is either interested in cartoons because it's more on the historical side and stuff like that. So yeah, but I did enjoy it, and I would find some way to recommend it, but it would be really hard. I'd have to find like a good candidate, a good conversation leading up to like, oh, you want to see, some historical Miyazaki, more grounded kind of work other than the dream sequences, then maybe check this one out. That's my final thoughts, but it is a good movie. I enjoyed it.
So I really, really enjoyed it. My favorite thing in this movie, we didn't even talk about it, is the movement. So there's times where like I noticed like the grass, the color would just go away and come back, and that's how they showed movement. But like, and I said before, the intensity of the film, like some of the crashes are just intense to me. So I'll take that away from this, and I don't think that most of his movies have that. Do they? Do they have that element of a lot of violence or like?
There's several, but this one I believe has probably like the most real forms of destruction and violence. But like a lot of his, because like said earlier, like there's a lot of movies where he does have these very fantastical planes. There are airship battles in several Miyazaki movies where there's scenes of destructions or like major scenes of that, but not as many that pushes the narrative that this one had.
So for me, that just leads into the next thing is I do want to see Porco Rosso. Am I saying that right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Because you guys have talked a lot about it, and I watched like a very short clip, and I was like, but I would recommend not watching it with the voices. I'm going to try this one, no voices, just going subtitles. Because if they're famous people, I feel like the whole time I'm going to be trying to figure out who they are. And I don't want to do that because that did happen to me with this. That was one thing I didn't love.
Some of his movies are really tough to find them in Japanese. Like it's just really hard. But Porco Rosso is Michael Keaton is the main guy. But he's Batman, and he does great as a flying pig, right? So I
love Michael Keaton.
I would still recommend that. Like I get you with the whole Jim thing. Like it's hard to see Jim in something else, but Michael Keaton is just on a whole nother level.
Yeah, so he's a chameleon, man. He's been in a lot of things and a lot of
it's easier. There's certain actors that it's easier to just be like, okay, I can see him in multiple different things.
Yeah, totally.
So, but if you can find the Japanese version, totally. But
I'm guessing these are not on the HBO. They're probably
Yeah.
I'll kick it over to Jason.
Okay, so I really liked this thing. I really, really enjoyed it. I actually did enjoy the voice acting. I did, I was doing the same thing. I was a little distracted trying to figure out who the people were. I thought Joseph Gordon-Levitt was great. I recognized his voice right away. I never quite got the voice of Kirikawa.
Me neither. We were talking about that.
Yeah, and I didn't look it up, but his voice was like really familiar. Like I've heard this, but I didn't know. But I did really like it. I thought they did a great job acting wise. I thought the animation was great. I thought the story was great. As far as Miyazaki films go, I've only seen 3. This is my 3rd one, and I will put this as number 3 of the 3. Not that this was bad. I thought it was a great flick, but just as far as the other ones I've seen, this would be number 3 so far on that list. I would recommend this to a lot of people. I would recommend this to people who like animation. I would recommend this to maybe not people who are into World War II stuff because it doesn't deal enough with that. That's just sort of like the outlining backdrop, like pre-war, historically speaking. But people who are into like animation for real, I could recommend this too. People who are into Miyazaki films, if you liked any of them, you'll probably like this one as well. Yeah, I guess I kind of favor Dino's opinion on recommendation as well. It's like I can't really think. I feel like I could recommend it to anyone. Like you'll like it if you sit down and watch it, but as far as conversationally, I don't know. Like, ooh, like how do I even bring it up in conversation? Like you got to see this movie, you know?
Watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But I doubt very many people would watch it and say I hated it. You know, like it's pretty good. Let me see. Yeah, I guess that's my final thought. And I would watch it again. I will watch this thing again. I don't need to go back to it anytime soon, but it does make me excited about watching more of Miyazaki's catalog and Studio Ghibli's catalog.
Good. Is Michaela around? Does she have a final thought?
No, it's all right. So, yeah, so I guess we're going to wrap this up soon. So, yeah, my final thought, really great film overall. I would definitely recommend this to, like, basically anyone, especially those who are into Miyazaki's catalog or Studio Ghibli's catalog. It's because with Studio Ghibli films, like, it's either very, like, family-friendly or very much, like, about family or really goes hard onto the mystical and magical elements of the filmmaking and whatnot. But like this one, you get sense that it's very personal and very like focused on the story of just this one man like with a dream, just trying to create in a world where his creations unfortunately lead to destruction and war. But like very beautiful animation. I would probably say this is pretty much an A movie. I don't know if it's A plus in the Studio Ghibli catalog of films, but definitely A, and I would recommend it to almost anybody. To be quite honest, whether they're history buffs or into animation or into old Hollywood. I got a lot of old Hollywood vibes off this film while I'm watching it. I would definitely recommend it to folks in general.
Nice.
Cool.
All right. You got
Is that everybody? Is Michaela here?
She's in and out, but Jason, you got a question?
Sure. Steve, what do you got for us next week?
Well, Steve is not available, and I don't know why you would be asking him, because it's Michaela's turn.
Yeah, so next week we are going to be watching M.
Boom.
That's awesome. I've been wanting to watch it.
I'm excited too.
Yeah, same. All right. Well, with that, check us out next week for M. And from Oye Dimelo Cinema Club, I'm Dino. We got Jason, Steve, Michaela in the paper plane. Catch us next time. Bye.